Welcome back. In session 1, I posed a question. Athens and Jerusalem, are they bedfellows? Can they work together? I ended with a question. Has the marriage of Athens and Jerusalem ever produced anything but compromise? Let's try to answer this question. And there are two ways of resolving this question, but interestingly, each has a problem. There are two easy answers, but interestingly, both are wrong. So the first error is capitulation. And that is when Athens is swallowing Jerusalem. Here, reason is enthroned as the supreme judge, and revelation is admitted only insofar as it can pass examination at the bar of autonomous human thought. The miracles, therefore, are quietly explained away. The resurrection becomes a symbol. The cross becomes a moral example. God becomes a projection of our highest ideals. This is the path of much that called itself theology in the modern age. And its end is a faith with no power to save, because it has nothing left to confess that the world did not already believe. When the lectern becomes the master and the pulpit becomes the servant, the gospel evaporates. Think about that. Let's go to the second possible resolution, which is also an error. And that is Jerusalem fleeing Athens. That is the error of retreat. Here, the mind of reason is treated as an enemy to faith. Learning becomes a snare, and the life of inquiry as a betrayal of simple faith. This is the path of obscurantism, of anti-intellectualism, of the believer who wears ignorance as a badge of holiness. It mistakes the warning against worldly wisdom for a blanket condemnation of all wisdom. And it forgets that God commanded us to love Him with all our mind, and here our mind with emphasis. And that is in Matthew 22 and the verse 37. You see, when the pulpit despises the lectern, it does not protect the faith. It merely surrenders the field of ideas to its enemies and raises a generation unable to give a reason for the hope that is in them, as 1 Peter 3 verse 15 indicates. So both errors share a single false premise. And what is that? That the truth can finally contradict truth. Did you hear that? This is that single false promise or false premise that truth can finally contradict truth. That what God reveals and what God created might be at war. The whole burden of this talk I'm having with you is to deny that premise. Let's move on and look at the witness of Scripture. Paul was at the Areopagus. What did Paul say? We do not have to guess how the apostolic church handled this question. And by the apostolic church, I don't mean our modern apostolic church. I'm talking about the first century church. Because Scripture shows us the Apostle Paul walking into Athens itself. I'm talking about the physical, literal Athens. And standing up to preach in the very shadow of the academy. In Acts 17, Paul comes to the Areopagus, to Mars Hill, surrounded by Epicurean and Stoic philosophers. Notice what he does not to do. He does not flee the marketplace of ideas. And Paul does not resolve his message to flatter it. Instead, Paul engages. He observes their altar inscribed, quote, to an unknown God. And he seizes this as an opportunity and as a point of contact. He asks, "What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you." Then, and this is astonishing, he quotes their own pagan poet back to them. "In him we live and move and have our being," unquote. Paul says he's borrowing from Epimenides. "For we are indeed," I'm quoting Epimenides, "his offspring." He says, acting or citing the Stoic poet Aratus. So Paul plunders the treasures of Athens to preach the gospel of Jerusalem. Sorry, the gospel of God of Jerusalem. Or the gospel that is in Jerusalem. He takes what is true in the philosophers, that the divine is near, that the humanity is more than dust, and he shows that these scattered intuitions find their home and their correction in the God who made the world and raised Jesus from the dead. I'm coming back. Follow. Shalom.